Hi folks, Dr. P here, and I have talked in the past about how game design is no longer a meritocracy if it ever was. That is, it's not necessarily the good games that get published, and there are a variety of reasons for this. What's important is grabbing the usually short-term interest of the customers for marketing purposes. And I have lots of examples. For example, one publisher I had actually signed contracts with for 2 games, one of which I had given to them a year or 2 before, and they had come back to me and said, we want to publish this game. But a few years later, they said, no, we don't want to publish these games. And the way contracts work, that's perfectly legal. And that's because they weren't sure that they would show well on Kickstarter. Well, Kickstarter is short and simple, but it's also a place where "oh shiny" counts for a great deal. After all, you don't know how the game is going to play before you support it on Kickstarter. You know very little about the game, really. So some publishers get imprisoned by their sources, as I say, and if their source is Kickstarter, then they're only going to publish games they think will do well on Kickstarter. But this shows in something like the P500 for GMT games. GMT is a big publisher of mostly war games, and they have a system whereby they need to get 500 pre-orders for a game before they will publish it. So they know that there's at least that amount of interest. And they don't use Kickstarter so much because they have this system, and then they don't have to cough up the 5% or whatever it is to Kickstarter. They stick to this system religiously because one of the times they didn't, they were convinced they had a really good game, and they ended up with 8,000 copies that they couldn't sell and just had to dump them, and it nearly broke the company. Now, the funny thing about this is the games that are hard to get through the P500 often sell best in the long run, because in the long run, you're talking about how good a game it is and not the attractive parts of it that stand out and get somebody's short-term interest. And that's the key to what I'm saying. When you design a game, you have to keep in mind the short-term interest that it's going to generate. Now, that's hard to judge, of course, but you can try. You cannot ignore it, because it might be the best game ever, but if you can't convince the publisher that people are going to want to buy it and buy it immediately, because games tend to sell for a few weeks or months and then sales drop off the cliff, then they're not going to publish that game. Now, of course, I feel that's unfortunate, but that's the way it is. Thanks for listening.